Sonita, let's start with you. At the National University of Singapore, your law school, how are you finding students are using AI, and how are you preventing them from misusing the technology?
Why you need to do certain things, why you need to learn certain critical skills with or without the assistant, that all helps to solidify for the student whether or not to use this particular tool. So yes, there will be students who, if they are not better aware, they will try to use it, but sometimes that's not really their fault as well. They need to be made to understand why certain tools should be used perhaps at a later time after they've acquired certain critical skills without the tools.
And do you have a specific policy about use of chatbots?
So there is anti-plagiarism, obviously, in any tertiary institution. And the knee-jerk reaction when ChatGPT came out was, what are we going to, as educators, what are we going to do? Are all our students going to be plagiarizing things from ChatGPT? But then after a while, things settled down a little bit more, and we realized that we could leverage it as well. I mean, there was a lot of experimentation, but it could be a tool that could assist students. It could be a tool that could assist educators as well. So we're still in the throes of experimentation. But students basically know they can use it, they need to be aware of plagiarism policies, and they need to also take personal responsibility for how they use it.
Right.
And when in doubt, talk to the educators,
right.
Think about what the institution allows you to do.
Absolutely. Khairul, at Pandai, you've created a kind of AI tutor. Can you talk a little bit about how this works, and how do you make sure the tutor is providing information in a way that the student is actually learning, as opposed to sort of enabling them to sort of shortcut through the learning process and maybe not actually take on board the information that they should be acquiring?
All right. So just a little bit of context. Pandai is an education app that helps school students outside of school or after school to do revision, to study, to access educational materials. And Pandai started in 2020. Now we have more than 500,000 students using it. So we've incorporated AI, and one of the features is a chatbot that helps students with their homework, with their assignments and all that. But what we've done different is that, as unlike ChatGPT, the chatbot in Pandai actually accepts students' lingo. It's trained on the curriculum, and what's important is that it's designed not to give the answers outright, but instead to give step-by-step solutions. So to ask the students themselves what's next, and what do you understand now, and where do you think the next step is. And it's as if a personal tutor is sitting next to the student, asking the students question rather than giving the answer outright as if it's a calculator, right? So the danger is that with tools like Gen AI and ChatGPT, like Sonita mentioned, is that students would outsource everything to the AI, right? And we've heard many times that we can treat Gen AI as another educational tool like calculators, or when search engine came out, or Excel or Sheet, we can move on to more complex stuff. But the danger is that if we allow that to happen, the student will outsource not only their writing, but also the thinking process behind it, right? So with calculator, the student have still think about the question, what numbers to input, what operation to input, similarly with Excel sheet and Google, etc. But with Gen AI, you can just copy everything into Gen AI without even reading it, and then you get the answers, which is quite presentable. So that's the danger. You outsource the thinking as well.
Right, and you use a sort of Socratic method to prevent students from sort of leaping ahead to just having it do everything for them. Tim, I know at MBZ, you've been using LLMs to help, you've created an LLM that can help people improve their modern standard Arabic. I don't know if you can talk a little bit about that. And again, how do you make sure that it actually functions in this kind of tutoring role?
So as context, MBZ UAI, the Mohamed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence, we're based in Abu Dhabi. Greetings from UAE. We're watching very carefully what's happening in Singapore, learning a lot of lessons. So we're the world's first AI university, or a graduate university, master's and PhD students, about 70 faculty. We're, unlike most universities, we're actually in the game of commercially relevant LLM model training. So if you've done anything involving Arabic, if you've done anything involving Indonesian, if you've done anything involving AI safety, chances are you've used our LLMs, or you've used resources that have been developed at the university. So we're sort of very much sort of straddling the commercial academic divide as a university, a new paradigm university, if you like. So coming back to the actual question, the use cases for LLMs and AI more generally in education are sort of very real. In terms of research, so, I think there's a bit of a tip of the iceberg effect that we're seeing in terms of ChatGPT, and it's important to realize there's a lot more that's happening in AI beyond just LLMs. So we're also working in the space of personalized learning, trying to increase both the access and the scalability of education, in part using LLMs, yes, but very much trying to learn how a student is learning, try to learn what are the points of confusion in terms of their learning process, and cater the presentation of the curriculum and the generation of questions to what their weaknesses are and to try to complement their strengths, to both increase the sort of personalized tutoring access that if you come from a more wealthy background, you perhaps assume, to students throughout the world, not just in English, in languages beyond English as well. And I think that it's very important that we don't fixate too much. Yes, as educators, we sort of think about plagiarism and sort of cheating, and it's a very real issue as an educator that I do think about. But there are so many benefits, so many good things that can come out of the AI models, well beyond the sort of simplistic ChatGPT use cases that I think we need to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. I want to come to questions from the audience in a little bit, so please think of your questions, and I'll come to you in a minute. Khairul, I know that with Pandai, it's not just about sort of supporting the student, but you've also built aspects or features of the product that support teachers. Can you talk about that? And because I think that's sometimes overlooked, is that there's so much focus on what is the student doing, and less on, well, how can this technology actually support teachers?
All right. So when we started in 2020, our product was designed to help students directly. So students will go to school like they normally do, but after school, outside of school, instead of using paper-based stuff, they can use Pandai instead. And then around a year and a half ago, teachers actually came up to us saying, hey, is there something we can do for them, right? So now we have a new module called Pandai Teacher, where students can teachers can actually register, have their own ID, and have specific function just for that for them. So I don't want to get into so much detail, but it covers teaching planner, it covers monitoring the students, analysis of the students, as well as self-development content to develop themselves, the teachers themselves, rather than just to develop the students. So what we've seen is that there's a valid concern on the over-reliance on AI interaction that diminish the vital interaction between students and their teachers, right? So it's important that any tool that we develop actually enhances the interaction with teachers as well, and that's why, for example, in Pandai we have the parent module, the teachers module, try to complete the ecosystem somewhat, and we've seen, even with our chatbot, when students are interacting, they, initially, yes, they were asking academic questions. But after months of using the product, students actually started to share about their personal lives, sharing about their parents, sharing about their boyfriend, girlfriends, about the problems in school with their friends, right? And confiding into the chatbot, right? So that's also a danger where, young students especially, because we're dealing with K-12 primary school students as well, treating the bot as if like a friend, right? So replacing the vital interaction between students and their friends, the social interaction with teachers, etc. So that's the danger also, the ethics behind it as well.
Interesting. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that, this sort of the way these, maybe this morphs from being a tutor to kind of being a companion chatbot, and maybe there's this sort of tendency to go that way. Sonita, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like either the way teachers have to teach needs to change, or what they have to teach needs to change because of generative AI and because of the popularity of these chatbots?
I'll share the perspective, the legal perspective, since I'm with the law faculty. So I guess projecting into the future, the now maybe, we know that human and machine will need to work together, right? There needs to be some interaction there, and it's how the unit operates, leveraging the strengths of each, that will make it a positive combination. We also know that things will change extremely quickly, and people will need to learn and unlearn skills and knowledge extremely quickly. So taking that in mind and coming back to the curriculum that we teach at the law faculty, the question then is, what do we need to change, and how might we need to change how students learn things? Obviously, there will need to be a law and tech element, and by this exposure to technology can come in various different forms. Students need to be aware of, obviously, the latest digital products out there so that they can think about legal issues that can arise from that. There can be exposure in terms of how educational tools, personalized learning, because then they can see to what extent it is useful or not, and the strengths and weaknesses of the tool, so playing around with that, taking personal responsibility around that. Exposure to what's happening in the industry, because that changes at a breakneck speed as well. And learning how to deal with, or do the digital speak, I suppose, in the foreseeable future where students or lawyers need to speak to technologists, right, to build products that could help the industry. But apart from that, I think in terms of just thinking skills, you want to have higher order thinking skills, like analytical skills, where students can look at complicated things, break it down into its component parts, understand the relationship between the two. You need synthesis skills, where they can look at different threads of thought and create new patterns. You need also the values that students are imbibed with, because they need to understand why they are doing things. They need to understand why they are serving the community as a lawyer.
Those things aren't changing. Those are things that have sort of always been there and remain consistent, right?
But I think now they're more important.
More important than ever.
Yeah, and if you don't kind of celebrate the humanness of it, I mean, that's what your combination in the human in the loop is meant to be.
Right. I want to get questions. I know there's at least one question from the audience. So if we can go to the gentleman up here in front, who had his hand up, and then I also see there's someone in the back. But at the gentleman up here, I saw him first. So I don't know if we can get a mic to him quickly. If not, just stand up and say your name and where you're from and what your question is.
Hi, my name is Steve. I'm from Spark. So to your question, exactly the same thing that a student should know how to use AI, whether it's the earlier predictive AI or Gen AI, to be ready for the future. And the university has to adapt as and when, because the things are changing so fast. So whatever new comes, the student has to learn.
There's a mic for you. Yeah.
Student has to learn that. Otherwise, there could be universities which are doing it better than you, and your students get left behind. So rather than saying plagiarism, let them use Gen AI. Google came in and people started using Google. So the whole curriculum has to change in terms of asking questions which are about critical thinking, where they just can't copy paste from ChatGPT.
Yeah. So
right. So a student has to be well versed with all the latest stuff and change the curriculum, change the questions. And you're saying very rightly that students should be able to work with technology. So a law student should be able to work with technologists to come out with new AI models which help law.
That's a good. Do you have a question there? Or is it just sort of a comment on that?
Yes, I'm saying that the questions have to change and the curriculum has to change.
So I think that's echoing what Sonita was saying, which is that that maybe you change a little bit to emphasize these skills even more now, because you have technology that can do a lot of the simpler things. That's what you were saying. Tim, do you agree with that?
I mean, I do, and I think this is something that all universities are grappling with at the moment. I think even in the AI space, for us as a university, our focus has been very much on education of the AI innovators, the people who are going to be driving the next wave of AI innovation, breakthroughs in research, and absolutely we need those sorts of people. But one question we've been asking ourselves is, what would an undergraduate curriculum look like if we had a blank slate based on the existing technologies that are already here, as well as what we know is coming? What should that look like? And the answer isn't necessarily that they need to understand linear algebra and they need to be able to train models in PyTorch. It's possibly there's an even greater need for AI super users, people who understand how these different models work, they understand the weaknesses of the models, they understand why there are going to be shortcomings in terms of whatever. There was a lot of talk about sort of culture, values, in Sonita's answer. So why is it that you get biases in models? How is it I can use them most successfully? How can I apply them in different settings, whether it's legal settings or business settings? But not necessarily the sort of core skills to be able to train LLMs. We don't need the world to be awash with LLM trainers. You get a couple of thousand of those in the world and you're set, really. There's a lot more innovation to be had, but really it's the flow-through effects and the middleware, if you like. And I think for a modern AI curriculum, even in computer science, I think these are the things we should be thinking about rather than the sort of classic teach them algorithms and data structures and they have to be taught the way I was taught as an undergraduate. No, I don't think that's the case at all.
Interesting. I know there's one other question. The woman has her hand up very high in the middle back there. If you, go, yes, if you can stand up. I don't know, we'll get your mic to you very quickly. And if you could just say who you are and what your question is.
Hey, thank you so much. This is Wan Wei from Singapore, and really happy to be here to hear your perspective, because the definition of education has widened with technological cycles getting smaller and smaller. So my one question for everyone here is that how do you decide, what is one practical tip, that means not theory, practical tip that you have for everyone here, because we are all here to learn, to decide what to outsource and what not to outsource? Yeah, keen to learn from you all.
One practical tip. Khairul, do you have one practical tip for what students can maybe rely on an AI tutor for and what they shouldn't rely on an AI tutor for?
I think on the student side, they definitely will try to cheat, right? ChatGPT is the easiest, the fastest, the most efficient way to cheat, right? But like this gentleman has said, teachers have tried to change the way they do evaluation, right? For example, now exams are being done on paper, essays are submitted with editing history now, and then assignments are increasingly more personalized. So to force the students to answer and include their personal stories as well, right? Rather than something they can copy off the internet only. So I just want to highlight that it's important to highlight to the students what is education in the first place, right? If the message is we say, oh, you go to school, you go to college, you buy a big house, you buy an expensive car, then if that's the case, the message is that this is just a transaction, and obviously students are going to cheat. But on the other hand, if we say it is actually a way for us for students to become an informed citizen, a better decision maker, a better thinker, then maybe that's, the way it is supposed to be. So we can ask for philosophical question to our kids, but it invites us to, rethink how we think about education as well. So the fundamental of education.
Sonita, do you have one practical sort of tip or thing about output, what you should outsource?
So I second Khairul with what it means to be human. Like I said, the human and machine interaction, right? So you need to leverage on your strengths. And what are those strengths that will be important? Your critical thinking skills, your interpersonal skills, your emotional intelligence skills. I think you make sure you're not outsourcing those skills, right? Because you're just cheating your future self, essentially.
And Tim, what you do one tip for people?
One tip, I think agency and accountability are the two things that we have to hold on to. So whatever you're submitting as a student, it is your work. If you're using AI tools as part of that, you need to own it. So if it's code, say, you have to be able to tell me what every line of code does that you're submitting, even if you've used co-pilots to generate it. And you need to own it. And I think it's important to realize that a lot of these issues we're talking about aren't actually new issues. It's a new guise because we're talking about AI tools, but contract essay writing has been around, whether we like it or not, for a number of years. We've been grappling with it as universities. The big difference here, as I say, is agency. I can use these tools to enhance the work that I'm doing and embed them into my workflows, but I am ultimately the owner of what comes out of it, and I have to be able to defend everything that's there. If I'm getting someone else to write my essay, obviously I can't do that. This is me just with whatever embellishments using AI tools.
Great. Well, that's a great note to end it on. We're out of time, I'm afraid. We could go on a lot longer, but I want to thank my panelists, and thank you all for listening. Thank you.